Were you in trouble with the law?
Quite a bit, yes.
Were you ever in prison, though?
Nassau County Jail was as far as it went for me.
Right.
Everything that he said, it was the truth. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't feel it like, oh, this dude is lying. Everything he said, it was the truth. And one of the most genuine people you want to meet, man.
Hey, he knew how to fight for sure.
And he never.
He knew
wanted-
martial arts, man.
He was big into it, and you could tell when he was growing up, he was the guy that always had the center of attention.
Yeah.
You could just tell that.
Yeah, you could tell. He knows how to hold a story.
Charlie Murphy could crack you up so bad your ribs would be aching. But behind that grin was a history so dark, most people never dared to speak on it. He wasn't just Eddie Murphy's brother or a funny storyteller. He was a straight-up survivor of New York's grimiest streets. Charlie was a gang soldier in the King Pythons, shaped by poverty, heartbreak, and raw violence. When their father was murdered, Charlie turned cold and tough. He made it his mission to protect Eddie through high school, carrying scars from a world Hollywood could never imagine. And when that mask slipped, the truth came out. Charlie Murphy wasn't just funny, he was dangerous. And he always had been. Let's get into it, the hidden side of a legend.
Did you like to fight?
I learned to like it. You know, when it's something that's gonna happen, it's inevitable. You know, it's part of the environment. It's either one way or the other to take it. Either you're gonna ball up into a fetal position or shrimp or whatever.
Most people first met Charlie Murphy through comedy. They saw him on Chappelle's show, dropping wild stories that instantly turned into classics. To many, he was Eddie Murphy's big brother. That unforgettable voice, those razor-sharp punchlines, and a presence that demanded attention. He's the one who gave us the iconic Rick James and Prince skits, moments that carved his name deep into comedy history. But for those who really paid attention, Charlie was way more than Eddie's funny brother. He was a writer, an actor, and an artist who built his own lane in Hollywood. No cosigns needed. But here's the real kicker. For every laugh Charlie gave the world, there was a side of him almost nobody ever saw. A side born in violence, in loss, and in the unforgiving streets of Brooklyn and Long Island during the gritty 1970s.
I think what I really think affected me the most was, you know, when I was 10 years old, my father was murdered.
Right.
Okay? And I didn't realize it, but I guess it had an effect on me. I became, you know,
Angry.
a bad person.
Angry.
Angry or whatever, yeah, you know.
Long before the lights, cameras, and comedy fame, Charlie's reputation was built in back alleys, holding cells, and around men who fought for respect with their fists, and sometimes worse. Charlie himself once admitted his humor was fueled by anger. Not the kind you can laugh off, but the kind rooted deep in a childhood that was painfully unfair.
I think what I really think affected me the most was, you know, when I was 10 years old, my father was murdered.
Right.
Okay? And I didn't realize it, but I guess it had an effect on me. I became, you know,
Angry.
a bad person.
Angry.
Angry or whatever, yeah, you know.
He came into this world as Charles Quentin Murphy in 1959, right in Brooklyn's Bushwick neighborhood, a place where life was anything but easy. His parents split when he was just 5 years old, and by 10, tragedy hit hard. His father, Charles Edward Murphy, a transit cop who dreamed of being a stand-up comic, was murdered. Charlie later admitted he didn't even process it right. He didn't cry enough. He just buried the pain deep down and kept moving, because what else could a 10-year-old boy do? That kind of loss at that kind of age doesn't fade away. It carves into you. It hardens you forever. And that wasn't even the end of the storm. Soon after, his mother Lillian got sick with tuberculosis and had to be hospitalized. Charlie and Eddie were tossed into foster care, where their foster mother turned abusive. Imagine that. A child already crushed by the death of his father, now ripped from his sick mother, forced to defend himself and his little brother in a stranger's hostile home.
I'm very protective of both of my younger brothers.
Right. So if I said something bad, you would jump on my...
Those aren't the makings of a sweet childhood. Those are the makings of a fighter. That's exactly what Charlie became. The protector when Eddie was still just a kid. Charlie was the one making sure nobody laid a hand on him. At school, if anyone tried Eddie, they had to get through Charlie first. No exceptions. That responsibility, mixed with the silent pain eating at him inside, shaped exactly who Charlie was becoming: tough, unbreakable, and ready for anything. After his father's death, the family moved to Roosevelt, Long Island, and Charlie quickly realized he was stepping into another battlefield.
We moved to Roosevelt, and then, you know, I was an outcast in Roosevelt because I was from Brooklyn.
Right.
Banded together with, because that year, for some reason, there was a lot of people, like a mass migration of people from the city moving out to the island.
Right.
So we all became a crew.
On the surface, the neighborhood looked picture perfect. Picket fences, clean lawns, the kind of spot people thought was safe, but Charlie later revealed it was all a front. Roosevelt was rough, unpredictable, and way more dangerous than it appeared. For Charlie, Already carrying the pain of losing his father and the scars of foster care, Roosevelt was just another war zone. Kids from Brooklyn or the Bronx who got pushed out to Long Island weren't welcomed with open arms. They were tested, and if you weren't ready to fight, you were going to bleed. Charlie remembered it clearly. They moved to Roosevelt, and then, I was an outcast in Roosevelt because I was from Brooklyn. But Charlie wasn't built to bow down. He adapted. He linked up with other outsiders, kids just like him who had been relocated, and together they formed their own crew, the King Python Gang. That name wasn't for show. It was survival. Rolling with the King Pythons meant you weren't walking the streets alone. You had backup, you had protection, and you had a squad willing to ride for you. Charlie earned his spot fast. And before long, he wasn't just another soldier. They called him Little Boss. That nickname carried weight. It meant people respected his word and trusted his leadership. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the loudest, but Charlie carried himself with the kind of confidence that made people listen. And in Roosevelt, respect was everything. It kept you alive.
I got rid of my gun because I was gonna solve a problem that was very simple, okay, with a gun, because I got emotional, I got angry, and the first, you're gonna talk to me like that? I'm gonna solve it like this.
Being a King Python wasn't easy. Every day meant proving yourself, fighting after school, holding your ground on the block, and sometimes stepping into situations that could turn deadly in seconds. Roosevelt had crews everywhere, and those crews clashed hard. If someone disrespected you, if someone tested your gang, you had to strike back. Charlie learned quick. Backing down was never an option. One story Charlie shared says it all. Back in 9th grade, a classmate pressed a pistol straight to his forehead, pulled the trigger, and the gun jammed. That misfire was the only reason Charlie lived to tell it. And the wild part, moments like that weren't rare. That was just life in his world. Growing up like that rewires your mind. It makes you cautious, but it also makes you fearless. Once you've stared death in the face, you start moving different. That edge stuck with Charlie for life. Even Eddie admitted in interviews that nobody at school messed with him because they all knew who his brother was. Eddie said straight up, Charlie was in gangs. And Charlie wasn't just about street fights. He took it further. He studied martial arts, grinding his way to a black belt in karate. Comedians like Donald Rawlings backed it up too, saying Charlie knew how to really fight. He wasn't just throwing wild punches. He had skill, technique, and discipline.
He knew how to fight for sure.
And he
Knew martial arts, man.
He was big into it.
They swore he could even school UFC fighters on their own craft. That mix of raw toughness and trained precision made him flat out intimidating. But here's the flip side. Toughness doesn't erase consequences. Rolling with the King Pythons dragged Charlie into choices that left permanent scars. One of the darkest came during an armed robbery. He and some of his crew held up a cab driver at gunpoint. Charlie got caught, and the judge hit him with 3 years probation. For most people, that would have been a wake-up call, but not Charlie. The street still had a grip on him, and even while on probation, he caught more charges. Larceny, loitering, little hustles here and there, they might sound small, but when you're already on thin ice, those small charges stack heavy. The judge finally decided Charlie had burned through his last chance. This time, there was no walking away. He was sent to Nassau County Jail to serve 10 months. Charlie later admitted he was a straight-up knucklehead back then, moving reckless, acting on impulse, never thinking about the fallout. Jail was the price he had to pay. But even while running the streets, Charlie was searching for something deeper. For a stretch, he linked with the 5 Percenters, the nation of gods and earths, and took the name Omar Allah. The 5 Percenters gave him structure, identity, and a sense of belonging outside of the gang life. But Charlie's mind was sharp, analytical. He wasn't the type to follow blindly. He questioned lessons, studied the knowledge, and eventually realized that path wasn't really for him. Walking away showed another layer of who Charlie was. He wouldn't fake it for nobody if it didn't feel real. Through all of this, one thing never wavered: loyalty. Loyalty to his brother, to his friends, to his crew. That was the core of Charlie's code.
When he passed away, nobody said Eddie Murphy's brother died.
Right.
Everybody was like, Charlie Murphy passed away. So he had his true identity, and that was Charlie Murphy.
Now, jail is supposed to break you, humble you, make you scared straight. But when Charlie looked back, he said the craziest part was that jail didn't scare him at all. He didn't fold. He didn't hide. If anything, it became the first place where another side of him came alive. Locked up with nothing but time and tension, Charlie started cracking jokes, making inmates laugh, even spitting poems about the people around him. Donald Rawlings later pointed out that Charlie had never touched a stage before that. But in county lockup, with no spotlight and no script, Charlie Murphy discovered his voice. Don't get it twisted. Charlie wasn't just cracking jokes to survive those years. That stretch of his life gave him an edge you could feel when he walked into a room. This was a man who had faced the streets and prison and came out unbroken. When you live through that kind of chaos, it never leaves you. You carry it in your stance, in your energy, in how people treat you, respect through presence alone. The day Charlie walked out of jail, he didn't waste a second. No hanging around, no slipping back into the same street patterns. He marched straight into the Navy recruiter's office. It was 1978 and he was just 18 years old. Charlie later said, "That's when I became a man." In the military, the reason you take the right path is they eliminate the other choices. I needed that. They set me straight. You can hear it in those words. He knew he needed structure because without it, the streets would have kept pulling him under. The Navy gave Charlie something the block never could, discipline. But don't confuse that with softening him up. Discipline didn't water down his fire, it sharpened it. In the Navy, you had to wake up on time, follow orders, handle pressure without cracking, and Charlie thrived in that kind of environment. 6 years deep, Charlie walked out of the Navy tougher than he had ever been before. And that's saying something because he was already hardened by the time he enlisted. But now he came back with focus, strength, and a new sense of direction. Meanwhile, the world around him had changed. Eddie Murphy wasn't just Eddie anymore. He had blown up into Eddie Murphy the Superstar, Saturday Night Live, stand-up tours, blockbuster movies. Eddie was everywhere. With Eddie's fame exploding, the spotlight got bright. And not all of it was good. That's when Charlie stepped in. He rolled with Eddie as part of his security team.
He used to be Eddie's bodyguard when Eddie was like right at the height of his stuff. But Charlie was like martial arts.
Only now, instead of breaking up schoolyard fights, he was standing in the middle of Hollywood guarding one of the biggest stars on the planet. Charlie later explained it plain. I was there for the person I loved, but not everyone around Eddie was feeling that. Charlie wasn't the type to smile and play politics. If he thought something was off, he moved on it. And if he thought somebody was a threat, he treated them like one, period. Most of the people in Eddie's circle weren't used to that kind of energy. They were Hollywood types. Charlie was a man who had been in real fights, sat in real cells, and seen real danger. So when he looked at you with those eyes, people felt it. That wasn't acting, that was lived experience. Even though Charlie eventually left that security role because he knew deep down he wasn't built to live in the background, that toughness never left him. Even in Hollywood, he carried the same street mentality that got him there. Chris Rock once told the wild story of Charlie pulling up to an audition with a real gun, leaving the room shocked. And Neil Brennan, co-creator of Chappelle's show, recalled Charlie grabbing a Tech 9 to handle a situation, ready to settle it the same way he had back in the streets. Eddie had to step in and remind him, this isn't a movie, this is real. Charlie later admitted he got emotional, angry, and almost made the worst mistake of his life. Luckily, he never pulled the trigger.
Well, Neil Brennan tells this story, the co-creator of the Chappelle Show. He tells this story about you, that there was an actual situation where you grabbed a Tech 9 off a dresser and you were going to deal with a situation of some sort.
Eddie had to step in, reminding.
But the fact that he even reached for that weapon said it all about his instincts. When Charlie felt disrespected or threatened, survival mode kicked in instantly. Eventually, Charlie put the gun down for good, and he was grateful for that. But by then, he didn't even need a weapon for people to respect him. His size, his voice, his presence, and his past carried all the weight he needed. Comedians, actors, rappers, everybody who came across Charlie Murphy knew the same truth. He wasn't just a funny storyteller. He was a man who had lived it. Charlie Murphy was living the kind of life most people only rapped about or turned into movie scripts. But over time, he knew he had to change. He admitted straight up that his anger once pushed him close to making a fatal mistake with a gun. After that, he made the choice to let it go, to stop carrying, proof of growth from a man who had seen the edge and refused to fall over it. Then came 2003 when Dave Chappelle and Neil Brennan called Charlie in, and just like that, his moment arrived. This was the break that finally put his name in lights. But here's the difference. Charlie wasn't just funny. Plenty of people were funny. What made Charlie hit different was that his stories weren't fabricated. He wasn't acting tough for cameras, he had lived it. When Charlie sat down for Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories, it was like lightning in a bottle. Take the Rick James sketch. Overnight, it blew up into one of the most quoted comedy bits in TV history. But if you paid attention, Charlie wasn't just cracking jokes. He was telling real-life stories about Rick James crossing the line habitually. These weren't polished Hollywood anecdotes. Charlie had been in those rooms throwing real punches at a superstar who didn't know when to quit. He even said there were countless more stories too wild for television. And then came the Prince sketch. The random late-night basketball game with Prince and his crew sounded way too outrageous to be true. But Eddie Murphy himself confirmed every detail. Prince really did beat them on the court and then serve pancakes afterward. Prince even co-signed it, putting Dave Chappelle's parody of him on one of his single covers, turning the comedy into cultural history. That's when you knew these weren't just funny sketches. They were pieces of American pop culture. And what made them hit harder than any sitcom or stand-up special at the time was Charlie's delivery. He told it like he lived it. Raw, dangerous, and hilarious all at once. Even when the punchline landed, that aura of danger stayed in the room. And that's what made Charlie unforgettable. Even when Hollywood finally opened its doors after Chappelle's show, nobody looked at Charlie like he was just some funny dude chasing fame. People knew better. He had already lived a whole life before stepping on stage. That's why comedians, actors, even rappers respected him differently. They didn't see him as Eddie's shadow. They saw him as his own man, and a dangerous one at that. After Chappelle's show wrapped in 2006, Charlie hit a crossroad. Donald Rawlings, one of his closest friends in comedy, straight up bullied him into trying stand-up. At first, Charlie wasn't feeling it. He didn't want to do it. But Rawlings pushed back hard, telling him, "You so tough in every other way, but not with a microphone in your hand." That challenge lit the spark. That's how Charlie's second act began. It wasn't smooth. He bombed, he struggled, he even admitted stand-up almost sent his career into a tailspin. But Charlie was never the type to run from a fight. When Martin Lawrence gave him some real advice and to treat stand-up like another kind of battle, Charlie locked in. He put in the work, writing, rehearsing, touring, and little by little he carved out his own lane. Before long, he was out on the road with the I'm Rich tour, sharing stages with young talents like Bill Burr, back when Bill was still on the come-up. Later, Charlie hit the road with legends, George Lopez, Cedric the Entertainer, D.L. Hewley, Eddie Griffin. The Comedy Get Down tour put him shoulder to shoulder with some of the biggest names in the game. Charlie had gone from Eddie's brother to standing tall as a comedy heavyweight in his own right. But through it all, that edge stayed with him. He was still a martial artist, still someone you didn't want to test. Comedians told stories about being on tour and watching Charlie school UFC fighters on combat moves like he was their instructor. Nobody questioned him because they knew he was speaking from real experience, not theory. Even when the spotlight was shining, when America was laughing at his iconic sketches, the shadows of his past never disappeared. Charlie Murphy was more than Eddie Murphy's brother, more than a comedian. He was a man who walked through violence, loss, gangs, and prison, and somehow flipped that pain into unforgettable laughter. But look close, even at the height of his fame, and you could still see that fire in his eyes. Because once you've lived that life, it never really leaves you. So if you felt this breakdown of Charlie Murphy's hidden story, make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment, share this with your people, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives like this. See you on the next one.